You remember a few videos ago when I said that it would be absolutely insane if Rolex just released a watch out of absolutely nowhere?
Yep.
They did. They did do it. They did it on a fucking Saturday, buddy. And it wasn't just a facelift. It wasn't just a facelift. They changed everything, Michael. They changed the fucking movie. What is up, Watch Fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Watch Shop.
My name is Michael. This video is sponsored by Trade Coffee.
More on them later. When this was released out of nowhere on Saturday, I legitimately freaked out. I actually saw it before Rolex announced it. I was on the website.
You texted it to me, and right when you texted it, I was like, there's not a single article online yet.
It didn't exist. It was total fucking luck. I immediately posted it. My post was the one that went viral in Watch Kingdom.
Really?
Yeah, because I literally took a screenshot of my phone. I was like, guys, and it was funny because someone was like, how did you see this? Like, were you shopping for white gold Daytonas? And I'm like, I'm always shopping for white gold Daytonas.
Your most unintentional flex happened to be the best thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because the only way you could have been first to this news is if you hadn't or if you just shop for white gold Daytonas in your spare time.
Oh, that's so funny.
I freaked out. I legitimately thought it was a prank. I was like, I checked the date. Is it April Fool's? Like, is it April 1st? I have no concept of the date.
Rolex is an April Fool's joke.
No idea.
Yeah.
And no, this is a brilliant coordination of marketing and product because it's on both ends, and we're going to get into it. There are quite a few differences here in this Daytona. It is dial, it is bezel, it is caseback, it is movement.
They could have stopped at one.
They could have stopped at one.
Yes.
And most brands would have. Most brands would have said, oh yeah, let's just change the dial around a little bit. No, Rolex went full ham nuts. And there's a lot of reasons why, and I think there's a very intentional reason this is only available in white gold.
Yes.
And you've got a really big opinion as well.
It's all connected, my friend.
It's all connected.
Paul Newman connected through auctions, through this watch, through the race, and it really signifies a huge change in Rolex.
We're witnessing a crazy shift. We're witnessing a coordinated effort by Rolex.
Destroyed the market, destroyed the watch world, and just shifted how you can market a watch anymore.
Literally recraft it like clay from Ghost. That's it.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get into it. So they released a new Daytona, a new Rolex Daytona, which is the most desirable Rolex in general.
Yes.
In celebration of the anniversary of the 24 hours at Le Mans.
And this watch has like five whatever things that make it beyond belief.
Oh, this watch is truly beyond belief. This watch retails for $50,000 about.
Yep.
And we'll get into that in a little bit because it's about $9,000 more than a standard white gold Daytona. It's only in white gold. And I think it's going to be really interesting. We'll discuss this towards the end of the video. What will these watches be worth in the gray market, right? $50,000 retail. What will be the actual trading value of these watches and how could you get one? So this is going to be a great video.
I also have one thing.
Yes.
Rolex's marketing canon thing that we keep kind of pointing out with the auctions and the specific this and the specific that ultimately lines up here to something that I think is signaling that next year is going to be huge for Rolex. In all seriousness.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So that's great. I guess let's get into it, right?
Well, let's get into. Well, you have a pie pan on your wrist.
I Why am I wearing this? I am wearing not Zenith. I'm wearing an IWC perpetual calendar in rose gold. This watch is available in the Theo and Harris Watch Shop. This watch was also the centerpiece of a conversation that we recently published. On Theo and Harris with these two brothers talked about watches and really the theft. One of the two brothers, Joe, had $100,000 in watches stolen from him. And what's funny is this watch was actually right there on spinning in a
glass case,
and the thieves did not take this watch, so it's for sale. It has a lot of bad memories for him, but it's still a great watch, super good value. He paid $40,000, which is terrible value.
Right.
But around 25, it's actually a great
around
value
25,
watch.
it's an insane value.
Yeah, if your wrist is big enough to handle it, and mine is not.
This video is sponsored by Trade Coffee. Get coffee that's perfectly matched to you.
This is a necessity for me.
Yes.
It sounds terrible, but I really love my coffee in the morning and then after lunch.
This sounds terrible, says the nicest thing.
No, I know, but I was going to say I can't function without coffee, but that sounded bad. I can, of course. But I really love a delicious cup of coffee.
Yeah.
The one problem with coffee, same thing with wine, and watches for that matter.
Sure.
It's really it's almost overwhelming when you look at all these different sorts of coffees out there.
Yeah.
It is. It's like, okay, where do I start? Whose opinion can I ask? And that's where trade kind of comes in. That's where they solve that problem.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in a box and be like, well, I like this coffee, so that's what coffee tastes like.
Right.
That is not true.
Not
Trade
true.
Coffee has over 450 coffees from 55 different roasters. And when you order coffee beans, they'll get them to you within 48 hours of them being roasted, so they're always fresh.
Yeah.
So they want to know, what's your brew method? How experienced are you? What are your additions? Non-dairy milk, almond milk, whatever
Yep.
it may be. What is your roast level? And then what is your taste?
What is your taste? Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're really, through their program, their algorithm is basically saying, okay, how can we gather the most information from you about what you're most likely going to like? And you ultimately end up with a coffee that you not only enjoy, but that you probably would have never found otherwise.
Exactly. And then you get a new one because it's subscription based. And really, there's so many different coffees that you should try if you like coffee that this is great. And you get it at your door, fresh. You can't ask for anything more.
It's so much fun. It's exploratory. It's great.
Yeah. And if you sign up for any Trade subscription, Trade Coffee, they give you your first bag free.
So you can visit drinktrade.com/Theo Harris to get a free bag with any subscription today.
I highly recommend you guys go over to Trade and start to fill out the survey and get that first bag. So let's rewind all the way back to 1963,
Yes.
Which was the year that the Daytona was not officially released, but like officially the first Daytonas existed. But they weren't called Daytonas. They were actually called Le Mans. Right, they were they had Cosmograph on the dial. They were not signed Le Mans. For those of you who don't know, 24-hour at Le Mans is a very famous race like Talladega or like Daytona or like all these different or Grand Prix de Monaco, things like that.
Yeah,
very famous race. It was featured in Ford versus Ferrari. If you don't know anything about it. So anyway, that's when the Daytona was announced, and basically from then on, a legend really kind of just came into its own. It wasn't the first chronograph Rolex had ever made. They made pre-Daytona. They made watches that were great and could time things, but they weren't the decisive direction the brand would go in for their chronograph.
They looked more akin to vintage Universal Geneves than a Rolex Daytona.
Right.
That was kind of the era they were experimenting in, where there was still like an odd amount of decoration for Rolex.
A lot of instrumentation.
Exactly.
Very complicated.
Yes.
So the Daytona, in its simplicity, really was just kind of perfect. Not an immediate success, right? It took, like everything else, it took time, to build the model line.
It took a lot of time, really.
It took a lot of time. I mean, we talk about, going back 20-ish years ago, 25 years ago, when a watch that is now worth $1 million, right, a Paul Newman Daytona, could be had for, $11,000, $7,000. So it's a crazy history of Daytona. But it's truly wild that although it's called the Daytona after Daytona the track, it is truly the Le Mans, right? I suppose Le Mans was just maybe a little bit too French.
Close to Le Mania too.
Maybe close to Le Mania. Maybe
brand.
Who knows? It seems that a marketing decision was made.
Yep.
It certainly wasn't a product decision. It was a marketing decision to say, let's line up with Daytona. That seems to have global appeal. And I happen to agree.
Yeah. It's also easier to read.
It's also easier to read, right?
Yeah.
I say that all the time, right? When brands are too ethnic, it's like turns off a whole lot of people.
You're like, I don't know how to say that. So
Everyone can say
embarrassed.
Daytona.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, great. Let's get into the release. That laid the groundwork.
So, interestingly, looking at this watch, what jumps out right away? One of them is a little bit more subtle. So, what's the most blatant thing that you see that's not on white gold chronographs?
The most blatant thing. Oh, what? The bezel?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's a ceramic bezel.
It's a ceramic bezel.
Yes.
So this is where Rolex could have easily just done, not even a new watch, essentially. You could have gotten a special box or something. But there's now a ceramic bezel on a white gold Daytona. And at the 100, celebrating the 100 years, it's red.
Which is what Rolex used to do, was red print, right? You have a big red Daytona. They used to do things like that.
Yeah.
Red subs, red used to happen in Rolex. Milgauss was in red. It was a thing that it really has since kind of whittled away. It still does exist on Daytonas, but this was a really special little detail.
And as funny as it is to say, this is a very loud thing for Rolex to do. Put red on a bezel.
Yes. That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I thought it was tasteful. It celebrates the 100 years, but I think it's still tasteful.
Yes, exactly. Second thing, this is called a Paul Newman dial. Why is it called that?
So Paul Newman dials, when manually wound, Rolex Daytonas were being, marketed and sold in boutiques and authorized dealers in the, 60s and 70s and 80s. They were offered in multiple references, and the different references indicated the differences in the watch's bezels, whether they were acrylic or steel. They represented differences in the pushers as well, whether they were just pump or whether they were screw down. The screw down being oysters, so they were more water resistant.
Are you team pump or team screw down?
Oh, I'm team screw down every day of the week.
Really?
For sure. Oh. And I'm a 2-pump chump, but I am a screw down guy.
Well, that's why you have bad memories.
Right, exactly.
Every time something, you're like, oh.
Oh, God. So 100%. I think that just adds this just cool, character to the watch.
Yeah.
The was it Knurling or Knurling, whatever.
Yep.
I think it's really cool. Why, you're a pump guy?
Well, it's just when I'm because I have my Zenith, and whenever I'm actually timing something, I usually don't want to be like, okay, gotta unscrew this, then push it. I love just being able to tap it.
Right, when you're timing things, it's, you have a lot on your plate.
You're like, who uses a
Go tell somebody else. So when I use my Daytona.
Yeah, when you're cooking pasta, Michael, at 11 p.m. alone, you really are bothered by unscrewing a Daytona? I'm like, yeah.
This ruined my day. In addition, there were 2 different dial sets, right? They were the standard dials, and then they were what they called exotic dials. The exotic dials had this funky kind of print, right? These, you can see it here. It's evident, right? It's hard to almost explain. There's this interesting font and
blocked and thinner. It's odd.
And these were not popular watches. They were actually less desirable. And then there was a photo that went viral through an Italian magazine, I believe, of Paul Newman wearing a Daytona exotic dial.
Really?
And it ultimately became known as the Paul Newman.
When was that?
When did that? 90s.
90s.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And again, and for years after that, still people were not they didn't become truly crazy collectible. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't a wildfire.
Right.
It was mumbles. It was like, oh, it's a Paul Newman. Oh, it's a Paul Newman, and it took years, and it built. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
Whereas you've got maybe like the John Mayer Daytona, the green dial yellow gold Daytona. He said it, and they almost immediately went up. It's because it's the internet.
Exactly. I was gonna say Paul Newman is the guy that set the standard in this watch is named after this. There's obviously Universal Genève. There's the Nina and the Evil Nina and stuff like that. But it was Paul Newman. This is why this watch is special. It's tied to this guy.
Yes, and then Paul Newman's Daytona ultimately went to auction at Phillips in 2017, and that watch sold for almost $18 million with buyer's premium. Yes. So it's just been super famous. It's been a wild, wild ride. I know guys that have made millions in Paul Newmans, and I know guys, individual buyers that have lost hundreds of thousands in Paul Newmans. Really? It's been a crazy market. It's just been a fucking crazy market.
Yes.
But I never expected Rolex to do this release. I never expected these exotic subdials, this exotic format, to enter its way back into Rolex.
Never mind in a surprise release.
Never.
Because we always also say Rolex nods to the past, but never pulls from the past.
Right. Rolex, exactly. Rolex does not just appropriate. They won't do it. It really opened up a whole thing when the Daytona was released. That was a vintage-ish inspired Daytona in the ceramic, but it certainly wasn't a vintage, reissue, not at all.
Right.
So it's just been a wild ride to see how Rolex is treating their past,
Right.
But never did we expect a blatant pull like that.
Yeah, no. That's just, it goes against kind of how we formulated the brand as it is a modern man's desire. Right. Not to go back and be like, well, I want the watch that looked like this one in the 70s. Right. I want the modern, my era watch.
Right. Exactly. So that is the largest difference. This watch is only available in white gold, which I think is fascinating. Certainly not stainless steel, but not even yellow. That's it.
Nothing.
White gold watch. Period. End. We have no idea of production numbers. The only production numbers that we know about are the Yachtmasters in titanium, which we know are very, very limited. Yes. I assume that this is going to be hyper limited as well.
I would also assume.
What do you think value is going to be? $51,000 retail. What is value?
Oh, what do I think value is going to be right away, or what do I think value is going to taper off to?
Both.
Right away, I think we're going to look at $200,000-$300,000.
Yeah.
Taper off to probably close to 150, 100.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that you'll hit 225. Definitely crack 2, and I think that you'll stabilize probably around 150.
Especially because there's so much information that will never make it to the mainstream.
Right.
Production numbers, is this a 1-year thing? Does it end after 101?
No, it's
what does this
definitely
mean?
a 1-year thing.
See, exactly. Sure. So it's like, okay, so are they making 80? Are they making 10? Are they making 1,000? I could see just it going banana. I could honestly see this causing a small bump in the watch market, which has been softening.
And what's kind of wild too is, I was speaking to some people when I was in Geneva about Rolex, production and the collection.
Yeah.
And they said the softest sub-market, this, whatever, in Rolex is white gold watches. It's a difficult market. It is the only sub-market in Rolex that the dealers actually have a slightly difficult time selling because they are so just interchangeable with steel in their aesthetic.
The people that probably want a precious metal for the most part want you to know they're wearing a precious
They want yellow or rose.
Wow.
So white gold is really the softest. So it's funny that Rolex is saying, oh yeah, market, you think that white gold is hard? Cool, we're going to make white gold cool.
Wow.
That's fascinating to me.
That is fascinating because it makes me think like, okay, well, what is your benefit here to pump up a market that's not retail?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
It would be retail because the whole idea would be let's try to make it at retail cool.
Oh, you mean even in retail?
In retail.
Softest market.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay,
in retail.
Oh,
yes. Like the question was formed. It was like, well, what do you think we'll ever see discounts at Rolex again? And the answer was in white gold, maybe. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Exactly.
You're doing well when you try to pump up the precious metal watches.
So Rolex may be also saying, here's white gold. We see this getting a little bit soft. Let's make this explosive. Because yellow, they're not worried about. You know what I mean? Like, they're not worried about steel.
Since the dawn
God
of
knows.
man. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So white gold, I think that was an intentional move.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah. They're not having trouble selling steel Daytonas.
No, I want one. They don't answer my calls. What's with that, by the way? I keep saying it's Michael, Theo, and Harris.
They don't care.
Oh.
Straps, as many of you should know, bring a whole world of potential to mix up your watch collection. They breathe new life into watches. They help you pull out different colors. They give them new personality. Straps can be very addictive. I know people with 2 watches and 10 straps because it adds so many facets to a collection in a fairly easy and fun way. So that's why they become such a part of the Theo and Harris culture and identity. I think we sell more exotic straps than almost anybody because I just love them so much and I love sharing them with you. Two more differences.
Yep.
A, the caseback. It is the first gold Daytona to have a see-through caseback.
Oh, right, because the only one was platinum.
Platinum, exactly. So it's the first gold Daytona with a see-through caseback, which I think we will ultimately see in the whole collection at scale.
Yes.
Or maybe only in white gold
And platinum.
I could see that.
Pump it up.
I could see it.
Wow.
And then finally is the movement. The movement is actually different.
They could have stopped. So is the dial too. We'll get into that in a second. But they could have stopped before the movement and before the dial change, and it still would have been a nuts watch.
Yes.
It would have been an insane release.
Yeah.
But it's not a 12-hour subdial anymore. It's a 24-hour subdial.
For 24-hour Le Mans.
Yeah.
Insane. Such a small, smart, and very expensive difference, right? Rolex needed to actually change the movement in the Daytona for this.
Yeah.
Like that is R&D. I mean, I'm sure it's easier than it sounds, but I'm sure that was difficult. It had to be.
Oh, it's one of those things where it's like, wow, everything else I can understand. Like, okay, we'll make the 100 red, make this out of white gold. Good. And, and we'll add a Paul Newman dial. That's 3 things. You probably don't have to do retooling or anything like that. Changing the movement is above and beyond any limited release we see from basically any other brand.
Insane.
They'll change materials any day, but changing the movement is like, whoa, that's R&D.
That's R&D. So you've got those 2 nods, right? You have the red 100 and then the 24 hours. I mean, come on.
And 24 hours, subdial is going to make it, especially if they cut it after a year and they go back to 12.
Totally.
After that year, the market's going to explode.
Totally.
Because then you're getting a different functioned watch.
Yes.
And interestingly, we keep talking about this, how we see that 3 Rolex Explorers with white dials come up for market, and I'm like, okay, it's like a guerrilla marketing tactic. Everybody's talking about it. They're looking at it. White dial Explorers are cool now. We saw it with the Milgauss. Milgauss got pumped super, super high, bought by Rolex. Interestingly, we just had 2 more Paul Newman Daytonas come up for auction. And then this comes out with a Paul Newman dial with a bunch of different things pumping stuff up. So it makes me think, like, what is this pipeline? Because we're starting to see it more and more realistically that Rolex is using auction pipelines to promote things. So we just did the Daytona, and it's not like, oh, we did it 8 months ago and this happened. We did it last week.
Yes.
We just sold 2 original Paul Newman owned Daytonas,
Over
not actual
over
Paul
$1 million.
Yeah, over $1 million. And then the next week, we released a modern Paul Newman Daytona.
Totally.
What is that?
It's insane. I've just never seen Rolex act in such, like, Rolex's production is a very, like, beautiful, just, it's a symphony, really. I mean, there's so much going on, and it's all being perfectly executed, right? To produce over 1 million watches a year, with incredibly low error rates. It's insane what Rolex does. They're on Foundry, whatever. But so far as their launches, it's never really been like, I've been in this business for 9 years, so it's not that long, but it's long enough to say I have never seen Rolex act in the public with such intent.
Yeah.
That's like, wow,
They're being very brash, like out loud to everybody.
Very out loud. This is really wild to watch.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, this was an unbelievable watch. This will be ungettable. I can't imagine. Maybe you'll see a few.
Paul Newman would be on the wait list for this if he was still alive. Yeah.
Maybe you'll see a few fall into the hands of commoners, as watches always do. Just a couple, just
enough to prove that it does go out.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
But no, this watch will be for the the best Rolex clients ever. Right.
Oh.
This will just be this will be borderline Rainbow Daytona, if not more, because it's much more affordable.
Much more affordable.
There's a whole world of people that can afford this that just they have 150 for the Rainbow. Like, we have $150,000. Like, that's a lot of money. 50 guys are like, yeah, f- it, I'll buy a watch.
And
Again, I know it sounds sick, but it is true.
there's also a lot of guys that would never wear rainbow jewels on their wrist, but a Stealth Wealth white gold watch.
Totally.
Done.
Insane.
I'd rather get that than the rainbow, they're probably going to say.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because I was speaking to Paul
Newman.
Paul Newman after Basel, and he and I both agreed that the white gold Daytonas, white gold and Everose were the sleepers. Because the subdials were just so beautiful. Everything about this watch is like perfect. That's a perfect Daytona.
I mean, look,
that is one of the most beautiful white gold Daytonas.
Look what happens to you though. What are you doing right now? What page are you on?
I'm on the white gold Daytona page.
You're on the white gold
That's
Daytona
it.
page. And okay, click on Paul Newman. You think, well, I definitely can't get that. It's more expensive. But like the black
the one
dial,
next to it?
Yeah, the one next to it's cool. I like that it's a steel bezel, or that it's not a ceramic bezel.
Yeah.
I like this black dial. I like this.
I'm telling you, this will be the era of Rolex, and it's amazing too because it wasn't like white gold Daytonas or white gold Rolexes were suffering. They weren't, right?
Yeah.
They may have been the first ones to be offered below retail, and Rolex solved that problem before it even happened.
Unacceptable.
Like, that is crazy.
Their softest market sports watch is probably beats entire brands.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's really wild. So, unbelievable job. I really did freak out when this happened. I texted you.
Yeah.
I almost called you. I was like, it's a Saturday. Let him be. But I was freaking out,
The important thing to mention is, like, if you're not super into watches or you don't like Rolex or whatever, is maybe like, okay, whatever. They released one more watch. And this is not that. This is an entire shift in how a watch is released. And every single watch market, every single watch brand follows this brand.
Totally.
Because this brand is in a different race.
Totally.
So if Rolex releases an entire collection and does one more thing and everybody goes nuts, next year everybody's going to have their entire collection. And then there'll be a one more thing.
Yes. It's amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah, wild. Great job, Rolex. I hope to see one of these in the middle.
Yeah.
That's about all I can say.
Yeah.
I'm
exactly.
not going to go on the list. John went on the list naturally.
Are you kidding? Well, he's going to get one.
but I we're not going to get one. But it is very cool and it's wild. So that's it.
Marketing genius.
Thank you all for watching. Go ahead and watch another Theo and Harris video.